Tier 1 trauma, ETA, 6 minutes.
And so it begins.
Welcome to the Pitt Podcast, the official companion podcast for HBO Max's The Pitt. I'm Hunter Harris, a screenwriter and cultural critic.
And I'm Dr. Alok Patel, a physician, journalist, basically a loudmouth for public health. Each week, we'll go inside the Pitt and talk to the people who make the show possible. And then we'll step outside the hospital so we can nerd out about the real medicine, the story, the drama, the culture, the ethics, all of it.
Season 2 of The Pitt drops in a few days on January 8th. And so to prepare, we're going to look back at Season 1, think about all the doctors, characters, medicine, patients, all of it, and think about what we can expect from Season 2.
And to do that and get you more insight, we're going to talk to executive producer and director John Wells and executive producer and showrunner R. Scott Gemmill. Today's shift starts now.
Please, I have Sickle!
Okay, stop. Everybody stop.
Stop!
Open your locker. You're gonna regret opening your fucking locker, or I will have security smash it open.
Multiple GSWs. There's an active shooter at Pitt Fest.
Hunter, the Pitt came in hot with audience reviews, ratings. I mean, there's Reddit threads over everything related to every episode. But I think what really caught everyone's attention was how many Emmys the Pitt won. I think it's 13 nominations, 5 wins, Best Actor, Supporting Actress, Guest Actor. And then what was awesome is it won the Emmy for outstanding drama. It's like the Pitt is onto something. From your perspective, what do you think is making the Pitt this cultural phenomenon? Why are people so fascinated by this show?
I think it's a lot of things. I think, first of all, the show is very good. It has this like frenetic, fast pace. It feels like you're, in these characters' shoes at all times, which I think is really a testament to the performances and also just the directing and the writing. And I think that it's been a long time since a medical drama has, at least to a layperson like myself, felt like how it feels to be in the hospital. I mean, healthcare is a nonpartisan issue right now. And seeing that from frontline workers is honestly very moving and very personalized. They're putting faces to statistics or to news stories in a way that I think is really special.
You're seeing it as almost like the show is humanizing all these headlines or stats.
Yeah,
that's how I'm hearing what you're saying.
Yeah, I also feel like maybe I'm a doctor now. I've watched enough of The Pitt.
I mean, probably.
No, never.
You could probably go in there and
be.
start doing some surgery as an intern. Just get your hands bloody. Just dive in.
But I want to ask you the same question. As a healthcare worker, professional, how do you feel like The Pitt, why do you feel like it has such much cultural capital, so much resonance?
So I feel like I could answer this question over the course of 15 hours because there's so much to talk about. But I think one thing that's incredible is The Pitt really nails the medical accuracy as much as you can for television. Obviously, you have to take some liberties because you got to make TV entertaining. I've joked with my friends and I've been like, if you made a really accurate medical show, it would be a bunch of us charting for a few hours, which nobody's going to watch. But I really have to hand it to the writers, to, ER doctors, Mel Herbert, Joe Sachs, who came in and added a lot of accuracy. The team themselves brought in so much real world experience. So for the medical community, medical accuracy, watching these procedures, it felt reassuring because you're like, oh my gosh, there's someone actually there making sure that they're in a legit looking ER, that they're doing procedures, that they have the right type of equipment. But then also this show didn't skip out on any of the characters, any of the actual real issues that people have in medicine. And it talks about in the first season, there's a single mother, there's issues with PTSD, there's topics about addiction, and they don't shy away from any of that. I think there's this perception sometimes that doctors and nurses just all have their shit together. And it's just, we're people, we're humans. And when you have baggage, you go to the hospital and you just have to bring the baggage with you.
Yeah.
And Noah's mentioned multiple times throughout interviews that humans have to compartmentalize our issues. When you show up for your family, for friends, for work, you got to try to separate these issues and then be present. And you have to do it in the hospital too. And they just portray that beautifully in this show.
I almost wonder, to my mind, everything is medically accurate. If you show a Band-Aid, that's medically accurate to me. But they all act with such conviction that I'm going to trust it outright. But I do really maybe one of my favorite parts of the show is that every hour is an hour in the shift. Every episode is an hour of the shift. And it really, I don't know, it's I like how the personal becomes professional, becomes personal again. And that kind of line between what is a private moment versus what's us just doing our jobs together is really, really touching.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because teamwork is a huge part of it. And I'm glad you actually brought that up because I think something else that this show does, it's very special, is it's not just a show about the star physician and the surgeon and the residents, but they really show you how a functional ER, a hospital is a real, it's a team effort. And you have a huge cast of characters. So like massive shout out to the Pitt for making charge nurse Dana such a central character. So she's like the boss. Like she runs that place.
Yeah.
She almost like controls the tone. And that's real. Like the charge nurses I know in the hospital, I would never mess with. They know what they're doing. And I think the interns like allude to that. They're like, don't piss off the nurses and things are going to be good. That's real. And like Dr. Robbie has that respect. That's accurate. But then also let's talk about the fact that Kiara, the social worker, she is so incredibly important in the show. But in real life, like we cannot run our healthcare system without social workers. It's not happening. But the social worker Kiara, who's played by Crystal McNeil, like that is such an important representation because there's certain situations in the hospital where, yeah, you see a patient and you've got, diagnosis, treatment, the actual medical plan, but then they're human beings who still have needs, whether those are housing, transportation, and other resources. And you got to find a way to bridge that gap. So the fact that they had a social worker front and center, like kudos. So when people in the healthcare system see that, they're like, oh my gosh, they're actually elevating all of healthcare and really bringing out these frustrations.
Yeah, I think from a character and like structure perspective, one of the things that I like the most about this show is that it's not a traditional drama where it's like you talk to the same 12 people every single episode. It really does, have a moment of like, here's a police officer, here's a security guard, here's a nurse, here's like, and you might not ever see those people again, like in the course of the day or in the course of the shift, but they still are a part of the fabric of what makes the ER or ED, I should say, run. And that's really important. It feels like, accurate to any workplace, not just the ED.
I'm with you, by the way, where I can never decide if we call it the ER or the ED. I feel like TV is like ER, and then in the hospital, they'll say ED or like go to the ED, which is kind of funny. But then some people hear ED and they're like, oh yeah, like erectile dysfunction. And I'm like,
that's
hold
what
up.
I thought for a long time.
I'm glad you brought up characters. It makes me think about like how the show was created, and it almost, to the untrained eye like me, feels like theater. Because I did read that it's a 4-sided stage. It looks like a real ER when you walk in, and the cinematographers had handheld cams, and it just feels like this like controlled chaos. But I wanted to ask you, what stood out to you as as a journalist, but also as a screenwriter, someone who truly understands how to bring a vision to life in theater? Like, what stood out to you in that sense?
I think it's really character. I think the fact that, let's take McKay, for example, that we see her with an ankle bracelet and then, we like don't really talk about it because you're in the course of a day. How are you going to ask someone, why are you wearing that? What's that from? And it's like, that it's kind of a slow rollout of all of these like personal details, I think feels so true, especially as people who are like, working to save lives. The patient stories are also so moving. The brain dead teen from like
gosh.
episode 3, I believe, like that one really, I was like, wow. And that's like the top of the season, basically. Like that's the beginning of someone's day. And that really moved me.
Oh my gosh. And let's also talk about how when McKay took the drill to her ankle monitor, I was like, yeah, get the thing out of here.
Moment. Loved it.
I love that they throw these moments of humanity out, like the ankle monitor. We'll stick with that. But they don't sit and make this whole like segment, be like, I got an ankle monitor because of this case. Like it's almost just like she throws it aside.
Yeah.
Like I'm a doctor. This is a little side story that audience can like think about and make your own judgment about. But this first season also tackled, as we mentioned, addiction and PTSD, but also these elements of child abuse, of overdoses, of human trafficking. There's a little nod to human trafficking, of situations with fertility. Like there's so many of these societal issues that happen in the ER that they just kind of threw in to show people like you're dealing with the entire person.
Yeah.
Were there any moments like that stood out to you where you were like, oh my gosh, like this happens?
Oh my goodness. I think the like masking debate between two women, and where one of the women was like, okay, I don't want to wear my mask, but I want my doctor to be wearing his mask. That really hit home for me. I think that as much as you're saying like there are such serious issues being tackled, something I like about this show in particular is that we also see kind of like lighthearted, more of like, okay, how did you like get a nail in your chest? Like that kind of stuff, which I think really speaks to maybe like the levity that the dark humor you can find in the middle of a very difficult day.
Humans got to laugh.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad the show like includes that. Because during the pandemic, people would see these videos, like TikTok videos, for example, in hospitals and say, oh my gosh, why are they dancing? Why are they laughing and not actively treating patients? And I'm like, well, in the break room, after a shift, anytime you have downtime, like doctors, nurses, technicians, everyone, they need this a little bit of a emotional release. And people have different personalities. And so on the Pitt, I love the fact that they included not only some of the banter between themselves and the dark humor, but they're joking with patients too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like making these little comments here and there, which I think is so incredibly necessary.
Yeah. Before we get ahead of ourselves and talk about season 2, I need a little recap of season 1. The big stories, the big characters, and a bustling cast, I would say. So let's do a little recap of the big moments from season 1.
I'm totally game. Before we do the recap, I got to make sure that you and I are on the same page when we're trying to understand the hierarchy of residents.
Please.
'Cause I know it's confusing. So
Yes.
we've got Dr. Michael Rabinovich, attending physician. He's Dr. Rob, he runs the Pitt. Then he is mentoring these resident doctors of varying years. So you've got Collins, Langdon, McKay, Mohan, King, Santos, and then 2 med students, Whitaker and Javadi.
Okay.
Like there's actually charts you can find online, but this is the dream team. And basically anything and everything can come through that door, such as the case with a sickle cell patient. And I think this speaks to what we were talking about, is about many themes that the Pitt really illustrates. In this case, a little bit about racism in healthcare, stereotyping, and kind of making these assumptions without getting to know a patient and their situation. And this whole interaction with Dr. Mo and the sickle cell patient really illustrates that.
Yeah. Let's watch it.
Let's take a look.
He's been screaming for narcotics nonstop. We found an empty Percocet bottle
are you
5 days
doing?
ago.
Why can't you call it?
He's been uncooperative and combative since we picked him.
I need her go.
Stop fighting. Calm the fuck down or I'm calling the cops.
My meds at home aren't working. Please, I have sickle cell.
Okay, stop. Everybody stop.
Stop!
What's your name?
It's Joyce. It's Joyce.
Joyce, is this your sickle cell pain?
Yes.
10 milligrams of IV morphine.
You really want 10?
Yes, repeat it in 5 minutes if needed. And she needs a dilaudid drip. This is a vaso-occlusive crisis.
I think that clip is so well done. It almost pushes the audience to check their own internal bias. It's like, would that be the same situation if she looked differently, if she was a man, if she was rich, if she was young? Like, how would that have altered? I mean, you immediately heard someone say, calm the fuck down or we're going to call the cops.
Yes. No. And look at how the security or the cops brought her into the hospital, like holding her down, yelling at her. And the fact that Dr. Mohan asked for her name and was listening to her and listening to her cries and hearing that she was saying sickle cell is so moving. And also, who does this disproportionate affect other than Black women?
Right on. I mean, listen, there's a population who doesn't really understand or necessarily believe that racism exists in healthcare. But basically every single study and patient survey says otherwise, and this clip is proof of that.
But that's just one example of how good the Pitt is and how varied all of these conditions are.
For sure.
We have a complicated birth, we have a measles outbreak, and we also, toward the end of the season, have the, I would say, most affecting moment, which is the MCI, the mass casualty incident, where it's all hands on deck and where, it's really, really tense and dire.
The MCI, the mass casualty incident that we're now kind of seeing the intro of, the shooting, the minute you hear Nurse Dana pick up that call, I think it just stopped every viewer in their tracks.
Yeah.
Because we are unfortunately living in a time when mass shootings happen way too often. And the show knew that they not only had to make sure that the intensity was there, but that the accuracy was there. And they took the time to talk to trauma surgeons, ER healthcare professionals, especially those who worked in the hospitals after the Las Vegas mass shooting. And they went for accuracy, emotional accuracy. And I think they really did an amazing, incredible, heartfelt job in making sure this tragedy that happens all the time in America was portrayed the way it needed to be. Not only with like, these are the statistics, these are the headlines, but more like these are the humans who are actually in the hospital receiving these patients.
Yeah.
Let's take a look.
You're a good man, Rabinovich. Don't let this place take that from you. Okay? God. Yep. Code triage. Multiple GSWs. There's an active shooter at Pitt Fest.
Taking his girlfriend in there.
So there's so much going on in this scene, but I mean, we have to talk about how Nurse Dana was just punched by like an unruly patient. And she's now introducing like what's going to define like the last back half of the season.
You're right. You can't help but notice the black eye.
Yeah.
and the fact that she almost has been through this before, and her character really kind of speaks to what nurses deal with on a regular basis. You know, surveys are showing that almost 9 out of 10 doctors and nurses have experienced some type of assault who work in the ER. Like, it's wild, and that happens. And, you know, the creators of the Pitt are like, hey, we're going to introduce major storylines, but we need to make sure that we elevate all these necessary conversations in healthcare.
And something else, you know, when I think about a mass casualty incident, I of course think about the victims, but I'm not thinking about the trauma that it can inflict on healthcare professionals and healthcare providers. Everyone who worked in the hospital that day saw something, felt something, and that this show shines a light on that also, I thought was very special.
Also, Noah Wyle delivers this amazing monologue at the beginning when he's kind of rounding everyone up.
Yeah.
And he like flawlessly puts his arm out and like hits that slap bracelet.
Yeah.
It's just all around amazing acting.
Triage will decide who goes where depending on their injury.
Every department will have a designated primary who will oversee their staff. If you need someone, look for the vest. We're all gonna have walkies. We can get you whatever you need.
No patient goes into a room unless it's a trauma bay, and they will have 4 patients each. We need to keep everybody out in the open so we can keep an eye on everything, okay? Triage is gonna assess and assign every patient to a specific zone with the colored slap band. Patient who comes in with a red slap band goes to the red zone, which is the trauma rooms with overflow out here.
Something about Robbie, too, is that he's dealing with his own trauma and his own pain and trying to be that support for everyone else. He's still thinking about his mentor who passed away during COVID. He's having flashbacks to the COVID time of emergency rooms being overrun. And that kind of carrying that with you into this extremely tense situation, I think is I could not imagine. Something I want to go back to is Dana's black eye. We talked about it a little bit, but earlier in the day, she had a disgruntled patient who was waiting in a waiting room forever, and he sees her outside on a smoke break and hits her in the face. And I'll go to war for Nurse Dana. No, get behind me. That's my girl. I could not believe this happened, but I guess this violence against healthcare workers is more common than I would ever think.
It's awful because people are frustrated with the healthcare system. Straight up. They're frustrated with how long it takes to get into an ER. Then they get frustrated with things such as healthcare billing. There's so many issues out there. And then people break, and they oftentimes take it out on a healthcare professional. They take it out on a nurse. They take it out on someone. You have so many variables involved, and it happens so often. It's raising yet another very important topic, being like, what are we doing to protect these people?
Yeah.
What are we doing to, boost up staffing and security? And I think they this happens, it gives the audience a moment to say oh, I'm gonna find that guy. If the cops don't find him, you mess with Nurse Dana, I will find him.
I'm on the streets. I'm looking. No, let's watch.
Hard at work? I'll take my chances.
People who work in the hospital are people too, and they've got their lives, they've got their situations. The show highlights that. Mel King is taking care of her sister. Dr. Collins is dealing with a miscarriage. You got Whitaker, we find out, who doesn't have a place to live.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild. He's living in the hospital somewhere. Which is kind of a smart move though, rent free.
How is this not smart?
I mean,
you can't live where you work.
You can't. I mean, sorry, that's bad. It's not smart. But Whitaker doesn't have a place to live, and that kind of highlights what people are going through to try to get training done. But the point is that you've got these personal problems and these issues, and you're still showing up for patients, and the show does a good job of kind of sprinkling in those problems. Question for you. When Santos started to notice that these drugs were missing and that the count of these benzos was kind of off, and she was calculating things, did you ever suspect that it was going to lead to this bombshell that Langdon is dealing with addiction?
No, because I think the show kind of sets up her as being a little bit of a bully. But the fact that she ended up being correct in the end, I was totally taken aback, because Langdon is kind of a little bit of the badass, kind of hot guy, big ego, goes really fast. And you don't want to see that person be, undermined in some way. So that was a really good way, I think, turn the audience's expectations on their head.
I like how you led with hot guy.
What can I say?
He does have
eyes.
hair. He's got good hair. He's got good hair. I'll give him that. Yeah. And he also has this almost a younger brother, older brother relationship with Dr. Robbie.
Yes.
In that moment, you're are you rooting for Santos to be right, do you want to see the drama as a viewer with like Langdon and Robbie? Like, I didn't even know where I was going.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like I'm like the fun police right now because I keep bringing up these real issues in healthcare. But unfortunately, yes, there are many people in the healthcare industry who suffer from addiction. But we see this like moment with Langdon and Dr. Robbie where it almost crosses over from, I'm a physician who can help you to like, I'm your older brother. What did you do to me?
Yeah.
There's real emotions.
Yeah. Let's watch it.
Yeah. I'm already getting like tense thinking about rewatching it.
Is the imprint code on these pills going to match Louis' Librium?
Go home, Frank.
No, it's not like you think. You remember whenever I helped my parents move, I was too cheap to pay for movers. I hurt my back. I told you that. You teased me about it. Remember? Well, our own Dr. Hagen prescribed me some pain meds and muscle relaxers. I was just weaning myself off. It was just for maintenance. I'm done. Robbie, come on. You know me, Robbie. You know me, man. I'm sorry. I fucked up. I was trying to...
What, steal pills?
No, it's not like you don't understand.
I don't fucking understand.
It's not like you think. I'm not high. I'm not high. You've seen what I do, Robbie. Could a drug addict do what I do?
Apparently. I just fucking let him. You're done. Leave now, or I will have Ahmad escort you out.
Robbie, please.
You are done.
What?
I wonder if he improv that what at the end because it's so good. But like that is why the show won an Emmy for outstanding drama.
No, that's maybe my favorite like scene in the whole season. I think it's so smart. Like the way that I almost wonder if Robbie was kind of like not sure, but he has to ask as like the, most senior person on the floor. But the way that Langdon immediately his mind jumps to Santos. And just the way that he acts guilty. He says guilty stuff, I think. And you can just see the pain in Robbie's eyes in a way that is so sad. And then my favorite line, maybe of the whole show again, is when Langdon says, well, you've seen what I can do. Like, can someone who's like high do what I do? And Robbie says, apparently, and I just let him. Like, you feel the breakdown of like true friendship in that moment, that Robbie is suddenly reevaluating a lot more than just what he's seen that day.
100%. Yeah, there's so much emotion in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
In that scene, like this roller coaster.
Yeah.
And it's like Robbie goes through like all the stages of grief, like in 15 seconds.
And Langdon plays it well too, because you see the desperation, the kind of, once he's kind of flailing and being like, well, what about this and what about that? And then he's done it. Then he's guilty and he's like really trying to cover his ass.
Yeah. And then you're like torn. You're like, no, I know that things are going to go down in the pit. And I was like, no, we need Dr. Langdon. But then you're like, wait, no, he's struggling right now. And he just committed a felony. Wait, whose side am I on?
But also, hello, the ED needs to be staffed. Like, one more question for you. Okay, this show has really maybe called me out, not called me in, about being like the know-it-all patient. There's one of the most affecting patients in season 1 is the measles, the teenager with measles, and the mom is like, don't give him the spinal tap because I've heard it could lead to paralysis. And it's like, okay, Dr. WebMD, like you're talking to trained physicians, but she thinks that she knows it all. And I think in some cases I am guilty of being the know-it-all patient who goes on Google and like gets very anxious about stuff. How often do you see that type of person, and how do you manage that in the moment?
Anyone who knows me knows I'm doing my best to control my blood pressure right now.
Yeah.
Because we see it all the time, all the time in almost every type of patient population, condition, to different extremes. Like this situation was a pretty extreme example.
Yeah.
When it's a life or death situation and someone's saying like, hey, don't give him a spinal tap. I have taken care of children who needed life-saving blood transfusions and their parents did not believe in blood transfusions. So they're like, do something else. And you're like, I'm going to get a court order to do this.
Yeah. And
may have to get the police involved. So it does happen. And honestly, like I feel for parents initially because people just want to do what's best for their families and their kids. But then all of a sudden, as you mentioned, the internet is this like treasure trove of garbage.
Yeah.
And you have all of a sudden, you aren't paying attention to the real signs, you aren't trusting doctors. And like Dr. Robbie like nails it when he gets mad and he like walks out the room and he says, I forgot the exact quote, but he says something along the lines of, she's going to go to Dr. Google for advice, but she doesn't want to actually get medical treatment in the hospital. And it's like a major frustration people say is like, you're a know-it-all, then why did you come here for treatment?
Love that.
And I think with vaccines, just one example is people no longer fear the actual diseases that we're trying to prevent. Instead, they fear that whatever they're reading on the internet. So, you know, this teenager in the show is intubated and has this potential neurologic condition, this brain inflammation. And they're like, what? Measles can do that? And Dr. Robbie's like, I guess I'm old because I just kind of know what's up. Like that scene was poignant. But listen, I respect an empowered patient.
Well, okay, thank you. And let me say, it's usually about my dermatologist, and I'm like, maybe a little laser here. Like, who knows? Like, maybe I do need it actually. Okay, last question. I mean, maybe this actually speaks to what we were just talking about, that this show really has shown me how much of being a physician is about managing a patient's anxieties and even just like their emotions as much as it is treating like what they've come in to solve. Does that feel true to you?
I think the interpersonal skills that it takes to be an effective nurse, doctor, healthcare professional is really highlighted in this show. And you can kind of see it in a few specific cases. I think there's that autistic gentleman who has like the sprained ankle.
Yeah.
And like Dr. King goes in there and she just connects with him. There's the homeless woman who gets empathy immediately from Dr. McKay. We talked about the sickle cell patient, and Dr. Mohan connects with her. And that's something that we want everyone to kind of try to understand. Did that stand out to you, or did you just kind of watch those play out and say like, oh, that's just a doctor who has good skills? Or did you pay attention and say like, oh no, that's that specific character who found their superpower?
I mean, I know, I think it's a writing thing, right? It's like that patients are paired with a doctor who can maybe speak to them the best, or even the patients that maybe challenge the doctor the most. That's, I think, a really good marker. I think, who's a patient that did that? Maybe even like Louis and Whitaker. Louis is such a good character, and Whitaker is like a little bit nervous, a little bit jumpy, and being met with a patient who has kind of seen it all before and feels very comfortable in the ED. That was like a really good moment of like, okay, maybe the exact patient Whitaker needs to grow as a doctor is someone like Louis.
That's a great point. I think these interns, what we're seeing in real time is they're learning so much, not only from their mentors, from their nurses, but they're learning in real time from patients. And I actually think it would be cool if the viewers and listeners of this podcast like wrote in on what type of doctor or what type of nurse actually connected with them. Because you hear those stories all the time.
Yeah.
You hear about people who are like, hey, I was in a lot of pain and I was like dismissed by, you know, this doctor, but then this person actually listened to me. And like those stories happen all the time.
We have so many good questions here today. And I think a lot of good observations too, not to toot our own horns.
I'm tooting. Wait, no, I'm not saying I'm tooting. I mean, I'm proud of us.
Just save it. Just leave it there. Just leave it there.
I'm
it's
proud
okay.
of us.
To talk more about intention and craft and impact, we have the executive producer and director, John Wells, the executive producer and showrunner, R. Scott Gemmill.
I was so stoked for this conversation.
It was a good one. Okay, our first question. The plot of this show, as viewers know, basically happens in real time. 1 hour of the shift is one episode. What is it like to work within a structure like that when it comes to like character development and pacing and even like the cases that you guys tackle?
Well, it was fun. It was a little unnerving because we didn't know if it was going to work, and we honestly, that lasted a while, you know. But it was good because it was new for all of us as actors, as directors, as producers, and especially as writers. So it forced you to lean in and sort of re-examine what you do, and I think it led to sort of new stuff for all of us. But it comes with pros and cons. You don't have a lot of time to tell your story, but on the other hand, you can't get bogged down in melodrama and personal stuff. You have to, all has to be in that 15 hours. So you have to be, I would say it's like more precision writing than anything else.
You're working within a frame, a very specific frame. And that frame is what actually happens to you during a single day at work. How much can you actually reveal? How do you learn about your coworkers? What are you going to find out? What realistically happens? And as soon as there was a lot of like, oh, you would never go that far. So there was a lot of like kind of paring back what we're doing, which I think is respect for the audience's intelligence to fill in the blanks and to be curious and interested about the people that they're just meeting at work.
Yeah, like on a regular show, a network show, who would fall in love over the course of the first season? Well, we only have 15 hours, so no one's fallen in love in 15 hours, I mean.
You might be interested
You
a
might
little
be,
bit,
yeah.
but you're not like,
Yeah.
you're not getting married, divorced, and having a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be a wild show. 15 hours to family arc.
But that was really liberating because you're not thinking about it that way. You get rid of all the medical melodrama in the sense of the personal lives of the characters beyond what you would actually experience during the course of a single shift. And that was really liberating.
Yeah, you're really in the moment. I mean, that's one of the reasons we did it in real time, was to bring the audience, really give them the sense of being in the emergency department. So once they got there, they can't leave, and things aren't, you see the painfully long day that everyone's sort of subjected to. And I think that was liberating for acting and directing and for the writing.
And a challenge to try and remember where you were during the course of the day, because the first hour of your shift we shot in July, and the last hour we shot in January, and yet you have to have experienced what it's like to be on your feet for 15 hours. So how far along in your exhaustion are you? When's the last time you actually had something to eat? When did you actually last get to sit down? How does that feel physically in your body? Do you slow down? Do we slow down because you slowed down? How do you ramp back up? So just as an acting and directing challenge, it was invigorating.
And throughout this very long day that you're portraying, the show also highlights a lot of really important story arcs that are talking about very important issues, drug abuse and trauma, and many social situations, sickle cell disease, and more. How do you all decide what stories that we want to highlight and where they're going to fall in the season?
Well, we start. There's sort of two aspects to it. There's the stories you want to tell, and then there's the character. So we usually start with the characters. Where do we want them to be at the end of this shift? What's going on in their lives? And then we have the list of medicine and stories that we want to tell. And then we try and find which one is best for what character and what's going to, is there... The medicine is always sort of the wallpaper of what's going on. And what's, even in the traumas, there's usually, and there should be anyways, something going on between the characters that really make, and that's really the story that's being told. The medicine is important, but it's really about how the doctors interact with each other, how they interact with the patients, and then what's going on internally with themselves.
And there's a tremendous amount of research that actually goes into determining what they want to talk about, rather than doing it kind of top down in the sense of what are the things that you want to see. A lot of it comes from talking to their two physicians who are in the room full time, who are writers on the show. There are 4 who rotate on set, who are all actually in the emergency rooms when they're not with us. We had 8 nurses to 10 nurses who are also on shifts, and they come in when they're not on shift to work for us. So they're telling us what they're concerned about. And then that's oftentimes what we already are aware of, but it's, what are you worried about? What are you thinking about at work? And so those things like, the amount of pressure that's coming back in the emergency rooms as primary care is less available, as 8 to 10 million people lose their health insurance. What is that going to mean for the people who actually now see people who could have had ailments that were diagnosed and treated more effectively in primary care suddenly coming through the door, in very bad shape. So it's a process of trying to figure that out, and also keeping track of that this is a teaching hospital. And during the course of a day, how much does a medical student learn? Not a lot. They have experiences during the day. How much does a second-year resident learn? What are they learning? What do they already know? What don't they know? And part of the challenge for us as we were doing the show is over the months that we were making the show, all of the actors got better more than the medical students and the physicians would have gotten better. So you're saying, like, this is only the 5th hour of your shift. You've had months to get better at these procedures, but you're not better at the procedures. So how do you unlearn what you've actually been learning just in the dexterity and physically on the set? So all of those challenges have been really exciting, and I think kept the writing and the narrative and everything very invigorated.
Well, speaking of the physicians and nurses you talk to, you don't need me to tell you this, but this is already heralded as the most medically accurate show
ever made. And I'm curious how, when it comes to the story arcs and what's happening in the procedures, how do the medical advisors help you kind of navigate what could be a plausible error versus what was conscious negligence, especially when it comes to how they're treating patients, controlled substances, and so forth?
Well, the doctors that we work with basically have veto power over the stories, which is one of the things that's really different for the writers. We oftentimes would say, hey, we want to do this kind of story. And they would go like, in the past, they would go like, well, you could kind of do that.
We cajole them into saying yes.
And we try to force them into it. The reality now is I go, no, that wouldn't happen. And so they constantly are keeping it honest. And it's a real conversation. Because we're doing a 15-hour shift, we have the opportunity for it to take as long as it would actually take in the emergency room during that shift to deal with these patients. So from the acting point of view, we're oftentimes hiring actors, wonderful actors, saying, we're going to give you a role to audition for. This scene is going to be the 7th episode that you're on. Before that, you're basically going to be a background extra. We're going to meet you once, you're going to be there forever, then you're going to have this great scene. That's a lot to ask of actors. You're going to be here for 3 months to do one scene. But it's trying to stay true to the medical accuracy. And on the set, we have a full-time ER physician who's there every single day for every single shot. And they will tell you, I can tell you as a director, you say, I got this. And they go, yeah, wouldn't happen that way. They wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be doing this. And so then you have to completely reconceive what you're doing, because it's very important that we're actually, the audience knows when we're making the artifice and we're getting as real as we can. And HBO Max has been extraordinary at allowing us to really show what we were never able to show before on television medical shows.
Scott, I want to ask about the sickle cell storyline, and how do you balance what mistakes are realistically possible for a doctor to make, like treating pain, while still building tension and keeping the story feeling, moving, the momentum?
I think you just have to be honest, I mean, I think that's, the authenticity is part of the integrity that we bring. So that was a story we wanted to tell. That's, there are some medical places within the U.S. that are better at dealing with sickle cell because they see more African-American patients. D.C. is one of them. Pittsburgh wasn't one of them, and that's at least what we were that was one of the stories we were getting across. And, that was also dealt with sort of racial profiling a little bit in terms of, because she was an African-American woman, they were immediately thought she was drug seeking, because she was, but she had a legitimate reason. She was in real pain. That's the other thing. We know that women in the emergency department sometimes their pain is not considered as the same as it is when it's a man sometimes. So a story like that has so many different layers to it, that it's worth telling. And, we talked to the experts. That's how we knew that there were underserved populations, and how sometimes those individuals are treated as if they're coming in with a whole different condition just because they're not used to, that hospital's not used to seeing it.
I'm curious how you think about closure on a show like this, where sometimes we don't really get to see what happens to a patient after they leave the emergency room, and how you feel about the audience's expectation maybe about that in a show like this.
That's the reality of being an emergency doctor. Some people go into emergency medicine for that very reason, that they don't have to have regular patients. They don't have to follow up. They basically call what we say, they treat them and street them. That's just, our show tends to follow the doctors and the nurses more than the patients, which a lot of shows may be more patient forward, and it's about the patient comes and we see the doctors save them. Whereas our show is more so about the doctors treating these patients, and then they're gone, and sometimes we will follow up, but usually that's if a doctor or one of the characters wants to follow up. But the reality is, they half the time never see these patients again. And so, once again,
90% of the time.
Yeah. Probably more than that. Right? You're right. And so that's just trying to be as authentic to the emergency department as we can.
And we've spent a lot of time in emergency departments and with emergency physicians. And I remember one time being in one, and there had been a very dramatic sort of gunshot, and saving trauma team came down. They kept them alive. And at the end of that shift, which was probably 10 hours later, somebody came down and said, hey, that guy made it. And the physician was like, what guy? Seen 30 patients since that guy. Said, was that today? Oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah. That was today? That's the experience in the emergency room for trauma physicians and emergency room physicians in major urban centers. So
yeah, they're likely on the assembly line fixing somebody and let them go.
It's like controlled chaos.
Yes.
You know, and I think back, how could I not think back about the episode after the Pitt Fest shooting, which I think that hit healthcare, the healthcare audience in a different way. TV ratings are through the roof. Everyone talked about that episode. And at the beginning of it, you have triage tags. You have chaos in the ER, people taking on different roles. You also have these small flashes of humanity and dark humor. As creators, as writers, what mattered the most to get right?
Everything.
All of it. Yeah, everything. I think all of it. You know, just it's tricky when you do a story like that because it's not fictionalized. You know, it is, but it's all based on things that have happened and tragic things. So I think you have to handle it with real honesty. I always go back to honesty, but I think you have to be careful and very empathetic to those who did suffer that. So we just tried to do it really as close to the truth as possible. And we talked to so many people and watched, a lot on the Las Vegas shooting and talked to survivors and talked to doctors who were involved and just tried to tell that story the way it would play out. And really give, we see these, we've almost become numb to them. It's almost like a weather report in terms of today's mass shooting, and then there's, everyone says, oh, our thoughts and prayers are there, but you never see what really happens in the aftermath. And the aftermath isn't just the bodies, it's also the ones who survived that. And then there's also the impact it has on the doctors and nurses who had to live through that. Once the trauma is over, it doesn't end when you patch them up. A lot of that trauma stays with the doctors for a long time. And that's ultimately what the first season Robbie's story was about, was that sort of trauma that he had never really dealt with finally reaching a head. And that led to, what happens now in terms of how he deals with it.
And you have to maintain an integrity about how you're going to do storytelling, because you're talking about experiences that people have had. And you are honoring you're honoring in some way the people who actually respond to that. So it's a gun control story, but it's primarily, let's not forget that every time one of the things happens, there are a whole group of dozens and dozens, sometimes hundreds of people who actually have to clean up, who have the aftermath, who have to deal with the aftermath, who have to talk to the families, who have to do all of this. Let's not forget that in these conversations, it's not just about, constitutional rights. It's about who actually has to carry the weight of some of these decisions that we've made in our country about what we're going to allow and not allow to happen. I don't want to debate the constitutional amendment. I just want to say there are people who actually have to do this.
Great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hunter, that conversation was awesome. I feel like we needed several more hours.
And we have several more questions too.
John, R. Scott, if you're watching, listening, let's get drinks and talk more. Hunter, what stood out to you from that conversation?
The idea of medicine as the wallpaper, that was a really good visual. And the doctors, the patients, the character stories as the set dressing, that was really special. I don't think any other medical drama thinks about medicine in that way, which shows why this show is different. What about you?
The passion that they both have, the integrity they both brought to the script, the fact that they went and talked to so many people in the healthcare industry to make sure that it was not only entertaining, but it just raised awareness in the right way, made it relatable, all of it. That's it for today's episode of the Pitt Podcast. We'll be back here every Thursday, right after each new episode drops.
You can watch us on HBO Max or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Pitt Podcast is a production of HBO Max in collaboration with PRX. The executive producer of PRX is Jocelyn Gonzalez. Our managing producer is Courtney Florentine. Our editor is Lucy Perkins, and our video producer and editor is Anthony Q. Artis, with assistant editor Damon Durrell Hinson. The show is engineered by Tommy Bazarian. Our production managers are Edwin Ochoa and Tony Carlson.
The executive producer of HBO Podcasts is Michael Gluckstad. The senior producer is Allison Cohen Sorokach, and the associate producer is Aaron Kelly. I'm Alok Patel.
And I'm Hunter Harris. We'll see you next week in the Pit.